live. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Patti Ashley, and welcome back to Shameless Facebook Friday Live. I know I was going really fast and furious in the end of 2020 doing this every week, and after my Christmas break, I've sort of slowed down a little bit. So today's my second Facebook Live in 2021, and I'm really excited about it because I feel like with Valentine's Day in February, I was thinking about shame and sex. And then, here we are in March and it's Women's History Month. So my guest today is Lutheran minister. Is that right?
Yep.
Lutheran?
Yep.
Also a licensed marriage and family therapist. And so who also is extremely interested in women, about women in religion. And so I'm really excited to introduce my guest today, Christine Ruth. Hi, Christine.
Hey, Patty. It's so good to be here. I am always trying to decide if I should call you Dr. Ashley.
Oh, are you kidding me? I cannot even believe
Hi, Dr. Ashley.
No, please
it's
don't.
so good to be with you today.
Christine is actually my office mate. And so, of course, I don't even, anyway, I'm definitely Patty to you and everybody else. Dr. Patty,
Okay.
I have all the student loans I have, the doctor helps, but other than that, So anyway, we're going to have a really great conversation today. Christine and I did this Facebook Live, I think back in October of last year, and everybody loved it. And we felt like we got to the end of the hour and there was still so much we wanted to talk about. So I'm excited because we can now go back and have those conversations. So I want to let people know if you're here, say hello and let us know you're here. Feel free to ask questions as we go along over in the chat. And so Christine, why don't you first tell us a little bit about your background in as a minister and as a therapist, and how you weave the two together.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, Patty, I'm an ELCA, which is Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Ordained minister. I've been serving as a pastor and a therapist for the last 21 years. And I love this topic today because, I came by this topic because I started out in youth ministry working with teenagers and had a lot of parents sending me their kids saying, teach my kids about sex. And I think a lot of parents are really anxious talking about sex. I think sex brings up a lot of shame, as as is clear from the title of this presentation. And I think that there hasn't been a lot of open conversation, at least in church circles, Christian circles, about shame and sex. And so it's really anyway, I started getting interested in this topic when I started considering, what do I want to teach and how do I want to teach about sex with my youth group kids, my teenagers, and how do I engage the parents who had a ton of shame about it? I mean, they didn't talk to their kids about it because they were church people who were saying, I don't want to tell my kids the truth about my experience. I want to teach them the Christian truth, recognizing that I didn't live this out. Which is a really complex place to start with your kids, right?
Right. Because kids just want to know the answers. They want to know the truth. Right.
Absolutely.
And the mystery makes it even harder. We learned it I learned it certainly in the schoolyard, and I was so naive. People were, saying things that I didn't understand and laughing. And I was like, well, that's how I learned about sex. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is true for most of us, statistically, 55 to 60%, depending on what you read. But 55 to 60% of us learned about sex from our friends.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't learn about it from our parents or sometimes siblings, and siblings have a huge impact on that. Did your parents talk with you about sex?
Oh, never.
Growing up?
My mom threw a little booklet in my room right before I started my period and said, here, you might want to read that. That was the extent of the conversation. That was it.
Yeah. I love that. And my parents tried really hard. They just came at it a little too late. right? I mean, my dad sat me down when I was about 16, 17
Mhm.
to have the talk with me and kind of explained, from his perspective, whatever he could. But it was just super awkward and embarrassing because it was the first time my dad and I had ever had any sort of conversation about anything intimate and weird.
Uh-huh.
Obviously these are conversations we want to start having with our kids in kindergarten and first and second grade, when we make the topic of sex at least an open conversation, right? And not wait until we're already awkward,
Right,
14, 15, or 16.
right, right. I remember my son came home one day. I think he was in my daughter and I were talking about this the other day about how old was he when this happened, because it was what he learned in health class at school was about how babies are made. So he comes home, I think it was like 4th or 5th grade maybe. So it's like he was like 10. And he goes, "Mom, guess what we learned in school today? We learned how babies were made. And I thought about it because, I have 4 kids." He goes, "That means you and dad did that 4 times. And that's really gross."
That's right. That's so funny. That's my son had a very similar reaction when he heard this preposterous truth at school. He came home and he said, "Mom, I am never getting married. That is disgusting." And I said, "Well, someday you might think differently, honey, but I get it."
Well, and the reason I think when we look at religion and we look at so much of like you said, the Christian beliefs and the Christianity, um, the Bible, even with parenting, when I look at, my work with as a parent educator and, parenting practices and how a lot of those came from misinterpreted biblical text, I think we can say the same for sex. It's a misinterpretation and then it becomes a shame-based, um, like Mary Magdalene. Okay, you know how I'm into that story,
Mhm.
the archetype of Mary Magdalene. And I grew up in a Catholic church where my mother and grandmother had statues of the Blessed Mother everywhere, and it was wonderful that I got to experience the feminine in religion, but it was the virgin feminine, and
Mhm.
Magdalene feminine was the whore. And so there's been this split. And like I know with the girls that I work with, and it's been really hard for me lately to hear some of the stories I'm hearing about, the confusion around sexuality. But the high school girls often say, they're either considered a slut or a prude. There's no in between. And I think you and I were
Right.
talking earlier about that. Where's the in between, and how much misunderstanding has been created by this religious based, shame based idea that sex is bad unless and until
Right.
the context of marriage. And then the feminist movement swings us over into women ought to be able to enjoy sex, but there's so much in between.
Yeah, there's so much gray. I think you're naming something so important, Patty. When I grew up in kind of an evangelical purity culture. So some of you might have some familiarity with that, but I grew up at a time where in my youth group, we all covenanted to not date until we were ready to get married. Okay. So we were going to be married to Jesus. Many of us had purity rings, and it was a very abstinent based culture. So, kind of the valuing was that you don't get involved sexually at all until you're married. Um, and the challenge, of course, was that we, growing up then, had, created this neural pathway that every time we were presented with a sexual stimulus, right? Like, oh, I'm attracted. I was dating a guy for several months, and every time I was tempted to have any sort of physical encounter with him, I had a part that came up and said, that's naughty, that's wrong, you're not allowed, and would try to shut me down. So I would move into dissociation.
Mhm.
And what I'm finding now that I do a lot of therapy with Christian couples is a lot of Christian couples, especially young Christian couples, are really struggling with sex in their marriage. You know, they did everything right by the book. They waited, many of them, until they got married, and now they're married. And every time they're together, they dissociate, right? There's a sexual trigger, and their brains have been taught over 10, 20, 30 years that this is naughty, don't go there, and to feel shame when it comes to a sexual trigger. And so now they're married and it's supposed to be okay, but they can't rewire their brain so they can enjoy it.
That is so well said, Christine, because, I've been working a lot with polyvagal theory and the neurobiology of shame and how that gets set up. And yeah, so we have these responses that help us, that we create in order to feel emotionally safe, basically, is what it is. So if my response has been, don't think about, the feelings that come up, the natural feelings that come up, we have to then write a whole new story, because that's what Porges talks about in polyvagal theory, is restorying, writing a new narrative. And the thing with writing a new story, like the poster I have in the office, it says the new story's never been written before, right? And so we always
Right.
go back to the old body memory story that says sex is bad, and we don't know how to create the new story. I had a great aha this week. My brain just does all these funny things when I'm thinking about analogies. But, it's like when we get an organ transplant,
Mm,
we're given immunosuppressant medication so the body
mhm,
doesn't reject that organ, right?
mhm,
And
mhm.
I thought about that as, when we try and write the new story, the old story is trying to reject it. So in what you're describing, the whole idea of how then do I create a story of sexuality and open, and just a real freedom around, exploring sexuality with my partner, when the old story is overriding that and causing this dissociative, which is really a moving away from, as a way to be in safety. And so to write the new story, how do you do that? I mean, how do you help people do that? That to restory that, because that's a tough one.
Great question. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, connecting it to what you were just saying before, I think part of writing the new story is coming up with, a sexual ethic and sexual values that are in the middle, right? Because as you just named before, we have the old story, at least for some people, which is an abstinence-based story. That women are not supposed to have sexual desire. Women are not supposed to dress in a way that would provoke desire. Women are not supposed to have erotic feelings. They're not supposed to, they're supposed to be sweet and well tempered, and they're supposed to be, there's this kind of image of the perfect Christian woman out there. And so when we've been taught for decades, that we're not supposed to feel erotic, that even just to have a desire that's sexual is wrong or naughty, then we often, and like we were just talking about, we swing into either just saying, forget it, I can't do this, I'm going to just have sex with whomever I want. And we might move into being really, having lots of hookups, and trying to take that power back. Or sometimes we move into cutoff, right? Which is, I'm not going to let myself feel any of those feelings because I'm not allowed to have them. And we try to move them into the shadow, right? So part of integrating this, which to me is wholeness, right? That's health, sexual health, is integrating these stories, is finding an ethic in between. Like, okay, maybe I don't feel comfortable, hooking up with everyone. I have a lot of clients who are in open polyamorous relationships, and they're coming to me saying, I'm feeling jealous. Like, I don't want to feel jealous. I want to be open. I like that my partner wants to hook up with lots of people. That's what we decided on. But I feel jealous and I feel anxious and I feel insecure. Can you help me with that?
Yeah.
And I want to validate that. Like, yeah, I mean, I have parts that would get insecure if I knew my partner was hooking up with lots of people at the same time,
Right.
right? Um, so that feels like a one extreme, and then we have this other of of people that move into cutoff because they have shame about having any desire, and they have shame about the fact that they're married, but they don't want to have sex, and here they waited, some of them 20, 30 years to have sex, and now they have a partner and they're like, I don't want to have sex with this partner. What's wrong with me?
Right.
Right. So how do we find that middle ground, that integrative place?
Yeah, I mean, right. I mean, and the heartbreaking stories I've been hearing from my college kids that I'm working with now is these um, consensual hookups that almost turn into assault, and that
Mm,
the the man is doing the boy is doing something that they don't want, but then they don't really stop. But then it was their idea to hook up, so then they want to just finish. And I've been hearing
mm,
a lot, and it's really breaking my heart because I feel like sex is such a natural expression, and
mm,
where is the emotional intimacy though? That's the part that I feel like is missing. And I think we have so much still to learn about our emotional self, that it's harder, it's more elusive. So when you go to the jealousy aspect, so yeah, so if I'm going to be able to enjoy the physical aspect of sex with multiple partners, how am I going to then compartmentalize, for lack of a better word, the emotional intimacy aspect of what that means when that partner is with other partners? And to me, I think it seems like a disconnect, but I know people say that they do it and it works, and I don't have any judgment about it, and I also question, how does that not happen, what you just described, if we are truly emotionally intimate? I think it requires emotional maturity, and also, I don't know, again, a story that's never been written before, but I don't know.
yeah,
I don't have the answers, but I do know that I don't think we really have a good story yet for what healthy sexuality might really entail without going into one extreme or the other.
absolutely. I think what you're naming is so right on, Patty, that I feel like we're wired, if we look at attachment theory, which is, how do we have healthy, secure attachments?
Mhm.
We're wired for our physical intimacy and our emotional intimacy to move together, right? Like that feels like an integrated path. So
Mhm.
when we try by our willpower to say, oh, I don't need those two things to move together,
Yeah.
it creates it creates some, you know, disparity, discontinuity, or um, uh, some lack of alignment that
Mhm.
we feel in our gut. And so even if intellectually we want to express ourselves in freedom and say, hey, I'm totally cool with hookups, there is this emotional part of us that comes up and says, and I really want to feel secure and chosen and loved and safe,
Mhm.
right? And it feels like those two things, as we create this new story, or this new ethic, that's not, radically abstinent based or radically, you know, freedom based in terms of just hooking up with whomever we choose. It feels like those two things need to come together somehow.
Mhm. Right. Right. So talk more about, you're calling it sexual ethics. Was that the word you used? What was it you
Yeah,
what was the language you
yeah, yeah. I think that, when we talk about, at least in the church circles, when we talk about, you know, God's will for sex, um, for the last many decades, the sexual ethic has been, you know, we don't, we're like Mary, you don't have sex until you get married.
Mhm.
And then when you get married, it's okay. But the challenge is today, of course, in those circles, and we're not all in those circles, of course, but the challenge in those circles is okay, the average age of marriage as of 2019, I don't know what it was at last year, but is 32. So the average age of first marriage is 32. So what does it mean to remain abstinent until you're 32 years old?
Mhm.
And how does that mess with your brain, right? So what's a healthy sexual ethic, in terms of what are some of the questions we can ask, right? To say, this is, what can we teach our teenagers? What can we teach our college students? What sort of wisdom can we guide them with in terms of questions to ask, about whether, when sex is, appropriate or not as much appropriate, but free or healthy or integrated or whole,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, and I think, it really comes down to we live in such a split of good and bad and right and wrong and this and that. And so we're trying to pick a side. And so that's what this whole slut or prude is, and so what you're just describing, in the religious context, I would guess, and you can correct me on this, it's probably a smaller percentage now, because of the women's movement and the sexual revolution of the 60s and 70s. People are wanting to explore their sexuality, but I think it's gone to this opposite extreme because it's becoming a this or that, if that makes any sense. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have that old school religious thing, so I'm just going to have whatever sex I want to have. But we're talking about, I think both of us are saying there isn't really a language or a story yet. And I work really hard with the girls that I talk to about this, because I don't want to make it sound like sex is bad. I don't want to make it sound like I'm, you know, talking old school. But at the same time, I don't want to shame for promiscuity, and so it's a challenge to find that language. And I think I do okay with it. I'm not even sure I could do it in this moment because it's like such a delicate, like, how do you language that one, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you feel like you have some examples of, college students or single adults who are feeling integrated, are feeling like they've discovered a healthy, safe sexuality? And what did that look like for them?
Um, it's tricky. It's tricky. I think, um, yeah, it's tricky because it becomes, finding a partner. And I think really the story here is talking to the men. I mean, that's what I was thinking when I heard that horrific story this week from one of my clients about what this boy did. And and one of many stories. So I think the thing is, men are confused, boys are confused. We have to really educate them what it means to respect a woman's body, regardless of,
Mhm.
whether it's an open relationship or exclusive. It's about respecting women's bodies. That's what it comes down to for me. And so, if a woman then can learn to respect her own body, it's how do you find that partner that's willing to negotiate well, I mean, really, see, that's why I'm talking about the emotional intimacy part, because it goes into so much more. Um,
Mhm.
so yes and no. I mean, I think some of the girls that I'm working with are choosing not to hook up, but they're also not finding the boys that can respect them. And so, and it's not like they're abstaining, it's just that they're more able to wait. I mean, it's so natural, like you were talking earlier about cutting off that sexual desire. It's a beautiful thing. That's how we make babies. That's how we procreate. That's how we enjoy our bodies, and it's a wonderful thing. And how do we explore that in a way that respects ourselves enough that the that 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 we're only willing to allow our partner um to engage in that aspect of our life if they're going to respect us as well. So I think it really comes down
Mhm.
to respect. And so the answer is not really, but that's what I'm noticing. um
Yeah.
the women I'm working with are choosing to, you know, wait and, pleasure themselves. I mean, masturbation's a whole other thing too, right? It's like
Mhm.
that's taboo in religion, and women, ought to be able to, enjoy, pleasuring themselves and not needing to go, have someone do it for them. You know, doing it
Right.
with a partner is always more fun, but it's like, you know, where's the level of self-respect? Yeah. So what
Yeah,
about
and self no
that same question? Like
yeah.
dating.
Yeah, and self-knowledge. What I found, having worked now for the last 20 years with a lot of Christian couples, or couples that identify as Christian. I've been shocked by how many women have never ever had an orgasm.
Mhm.
They don't know how to have one at all. Some of them have been married for 10, 15, 20 years, some longer, and they don't understand their own bodies. And so when we're raised in a culture where masturbation is totally off limits, at least according to the culture, I don't actually think this that scripture says that, although I could have a debate about that. um, but when we're raised to, in a sense, feel shame about even getting to know our own bodies, then how on earth are we supposed to teach our partners to understand our bodies when we don't understand our bodies? So I think that, that it's so important that women, in a sense, have the freedom to understand how their bodies work, understand what gives them pleasure, understand, what their desires are. I'm still working on that journey in terms of being able to express desire. It didn't even occur to me. I knew that I was supposed to be nice. I knew that I was supposed to be accommodating and kind, but I had a really conflicted relationship with just the concept of having desires and experiencing pleasure. As a woman, I thought, I'm not supposed to experience pleasure. If you're experiencing pleasure, you're not working hard enough. You have more work to do. Like, pleasure isn't something we talk about, right? Like, what brings us pleasure? What makes us feel alive?
Mhm.
And so, to me, some of the work I've been doing with my clients, married and single, is just helping women, especially, really identify what are their deepest desires, what are their fantasies, what are the things that bring them pleasure, and explore yourself enough so that and can interpret that to a partner should you feel comfortable to do so at some point,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? Like, that's definitely a starting point.
Yeah, well, and it makes me think about our conversation about just women and men in general, and your interest in women in the Bible and the patriarchal culture that has gone on for so long. And so when you were saying about, it's hard for women to recognize that it's okay for them or important for them to experience pleasure in their sexual experiences, um, that again was just a permission that we got in the 60s and 70s. So that's kind of brand new. And what does that mean? What does it look like? But again, the body memory has this historical sex is to serve the man, right? It's to serve your husband, and
Mhm.
I know I work with a lot of women who, you know, after a while they lose interest in sex, but then they, try and just have it because their husband wants to have it. But again, I think that to me is that emotional intimacy part because if I feel because women usually connect emotionally and then they want sex, men tend to want sex in order to get to their emotional connection. And so
Mhm.
that's what I see a lot in marriages, is that's
Isn't
where,
that annoying?
yeah, I know.
That's so true.
So in
It's
order
so
to
true how differently we're wired.
have sex with them, but they're not feeling connected because they can't, get in that gateway of the emotional intimacy. And I think that's the part that's really lacking. And I think emotions themselves are so elusive. And, in the patriarchal model, we didn't really want to talk about emotions because they were too like mysterious and frightening. So we want to like create some sort of structure of um yeah, that disconnect of the emotional piece. And so
Yeah.
to learn. So but
Yeah.
about women, I know just a few more minutes in this conversation, but I love that you and I had the we're talking a few months ago about your curiosity around women in the Bible and the stories of women in the Bible. And I think it's relevant because one, it's Women's History Month, March. And also because I think it has a lot to do with how the stories around our sexuality got, made up. And I also think it's really relevant in terms of how we integrate women and men. And and we're talking a lot about gender, and I just want to like point out the piece about um, gender because the cool part today is we have now all of this conversation about gender identities and all different ways people can express their gender identities. And I think in a way that to me is a way of blending and integrating. So it isn't whether we're a man or a woman, it's just that traditionally the males and females have played out these particular kinds of experiences. Like I said, men usually connect physically before emotionally, women usually emotionally before physically. But I think men and women
Mhm.
both have the capacity to integrate both those parts. And that's the wholeness and the emotional intimacy. So, that being said,
Mhm.
talk to me about what your thoughts are on the history of women um, in religion? I know it's a big question for a few minutes left, but I just think you have some fascinating ideas, and I just want to see if any of that. You
Well, I mean, I think, Patty, related to our previous conversation, one of my passions and something that I am really interested in studying more and researching is just um, understanding spiritually what comes alive in women. When I look at women like Saint Teresa of Avila or Hildegard de Bingen, saints, female saints, what I'm fascinated by is what is the spark? What is that moment of transformation that happens in women where they kind of come alive and recognize that God's speaking in them and that they have the power to speak with spiritual authority and clarity about their experience, right? Um, how was it that Hildegard de Bingen, for instance, would she was one of the first women to write volumes without being killed, I should say. She wasn't killed or burned at a stake, which was amazing for Hildegard. But to be able to trust this inner authority, how did she do that? I want to be able to trust my inner authority. I want to be able to trust that not only my quote unquote spiritual desires, but even my sexual desires are integrated with my soul, my spirit, my desire. And so, um, I think, when you alluded, you were talking about Mary before. I mean, Mary, Mother of God. I think she's a great example of someone that spoke with incredible authority. And here, I mean, how old was she? Maybe 13 or 14. And scripture says that, she said, I'm in, I'm terrified, but I'm in, God. Whatever you're doing in me, do it.
Yeah.
I'm ready to ride this ride. And I'm fascinated by what is it that gives women the courage um, to really trust that, to start trusting that inner spark and start expressing themselves holistically. And I want more of that in my life, right? Um,
I've always been so fascinated with Mary Magdalene as an archetype because I do believe that she was trained in the mystery schools and she had a deep wisdom knowledge, and that she was a teacher side by side with Jesus. But we tell the story of 2000 years, 2020 now, 21, um, where she wasn't even, she was considered a whore. So she was put over in this place of, this promiscuous woman, when, some of the, the lost, the Gnostic Gospels and even the traditional Gospels, scholars like Margaret Starbird, are seeing that possibly she was Jesus's bride and possibly she was a teacher. And what I make up is she taught him, it's like,
yeah, possibly she could have written one of the Gospels. And really,
I believe she did.
yeah. And yeah, Mary Magdalene wasn't really even, it doesn't say in the Bible that she was a whore. That was an assumption made about her, that Mary Magdalene was the prostitute caught in adultery. And those two stories were conflated around the 4th century, when concern, like St. Augustine started writing out of his own sexual shame. St. Augustine was one of the main theologians of the church, and he had a lot of sexual shame because before he had been a Christian, he had had an erection that he couldn't control. And he was so ashamed about that he started believing that, it's women's fault that I can't control my sexual urges.
Right.
And then started writing a lot in his confessions, and really came up with this whole concept of original sin, and then started conflating these stories and using Mary Magdalene as an example of prostitution.
I'm so glad
Um,
you brought that up because someone was telling me recently about that's was Augustine that started to create this idea that we are born with sin, which is a real core shame idea. And I think that's what's really underneath a lot of the core shame that many of us have, is these old religious beliefs and parenting practices. And so I'm really glad you said that, because it makes me then wonder what the 400 years prior to that may have been like. I don't know, but
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, right. So much of our kind of, when you talk about our prudishness, our puritanical ideas about sex really stem, at least in the church, stem from the 4th century. And I think that, obviously the church could understand the power of sex, which is why they were so concerned about harnessing it and controlling it. And whatever we have shame or inner conflicts about is sadly in the church what we create the most rules about.
Right.
um and it's funny because the Bible has a lot more to say about money than it does about sex, and yet sex seems to be the thing that we try to, that we spend most of our attention trying to corral or focus or dissociate from. um
Well, it's that power, it's that inner power of the feminine and the external power of, the patriarchal model of trying to. So it's interesting you said that St. Augustine said that, because I in Frances Vaughn's book, Shadows of the Sacred, I don't know if you read that or not,
Mm-mm.
transpersonal psychologist. I read her book years ago, and she talked about the fear of the feminine for that very reason, that
Hmm.
men get aroused and they want to then have control over that arousal. So that's how this whole patriarchal, serving men in the name of religion and really good and bad and right and wrong got all set up. And if you're talking about fourth century, or what is that, third century for your fourth outlet,
Mm-hmm.
you're
Yep.
talking 16 centuries, 17 centuries of this kind of fear of the feminine and the need to have power and control over our sexuality. So no wonder it's hard for girls today to figure it out, right?
Right. No wonder it's hard to write a new story.
Yeah.
Right. And so women like us need to start talking about this, even though this might feel awkward and we don't have like clear answers, right? And but women who want to live holistic, integrated lives really need to start talking about
Mhm,
sexuality and sexual expression and our ethic,
mhm.
so that we can mentor women coming up and help them find safety and freedom and integrate all these pieces into the new story you were referring to earlier.
I 100% agree, Christine. And that's why we're doing this. And I really thank you for, being so brave to talk about this hard topic, because it is hard. It makes people uncomfortable. And I agree. I think it's so important. We have to talk about it. It's like, what Brene Brown says about shame is everybody has it. Nobody wants to talk about it, and not talking about it makes it worse. And I
Mm-hmm.
think about shame and sex. And religion and the roles of women and all that stuff, we got to talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
because sex is pretty awesome. And, we as women ought to be able to enjoy that and have partners that respect that. And, I mean, that's a new story that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's the new story.
Mhm.
Right. And what I want to, if my daughter was listening, in which she's not, she's probably not even awake yet, I don't know, but I would want to say to my daughter, that you have been made in this incredible and beautiful way. Discover yourself, understand your body, and when you find the guy that you feel safe enough to have deep, intimate, emotional conversations with about sex, then you're ready to have it.
Or woman that,
Or
if,
woman, or
right,
woman. Absolutely.
or,
Absolutely. Or
or
whatever, wherever she goes,
whatever partner, no,
however she identifies, right? But thank you for saying that, Patti. Um, but just naming, for her that when she's ready to have those emotionally intimate conversations, then she's ready to start exploring.
and I think that's what ought to be taught in health class in middle school, because the kids are telling me that they're learning about the 50s, however many gender identities, which when I read them are all related to how we choose to have physical sex. None of them are really related to how we explore our emotional intimacy. And I think that's the part that's missing, is how do we explore that part? Because like you were saying
Yeah.
earlier, so well, it's like we think that we can separate the two, but mm, mm,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's write a book on this. Here's
know.
another book to write.
Okay, okay, you got it. I know. You want to, seriously. I mean, when I'm working with these girls now, I just like, oh, how do I say this? How do I find language to not shame sex or their experience, and to also, emphasize respecting your body? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
women are the feminine, the true feminine is mysterious. That's why the whole veil, the wedding veil, you probably know about the
Mm-hmm.
archetype of the veil.
Mm-hmm.
Women
Mm-hmm.
are supposed to be mysterious, not, don't have sex before you're married because it's a sin, but just there's a mystery of being a woman that um yeah, that's behind the veil. Yeah, we could go on and on and on. I know we're running out of time, and I want to thank Diane and Trisha for being with us today. And I'm glad you enjoyed the conversation. Does anybody have any questions? I think we're gonna wrap up here. Thanks for being with us, and thank you, Christine.
Yeah, Patty, thanks for opening up this conversation on Facebook Live. It was kind of a, just an initial dive. But yeah, lots of great conversations to explore. And I feel like we didn't even get to half of it. So thank you.
Yeah, well, and we'll do it again. So is there anything you want to say about your work? I know you're working pretty much remotely, your website, if you don't mind, type in your website in the chat, so people can find you if there might be somebody out there who wants to, work with you. Um,
Yeah.
make sure that's there.
Yeah. Sure. I'll put that in. And yeah, I'm at www.niwatcounseling.com. And I love working especially with couples, however you identify, around these issues and creating more openness and intimacy. I highly recommend. Patty, have you read any of Esther Perel's books, Mating in Captivity?
No, but I think you mentioned it. I need to. Yeah.
Well, she's one of the bold pioneers that are really inviting women to explore their erotic selves and learn to find expression of their eroticism in their relationships. And anyway, so I love working with couples around those things and individuals. And I'm so grateful for your work. I'm so grateful that you have all these college students coming to you and asking the questions, because that's where the healing starts, right?
Yeah, and it's so interesting because I really felt like my practice was moving more into middle-aged women in transition, but I keep getting all these referrals for young girls, and I'm like, there must be a reason for that. And
And
gosh, my heart goes out to them. Like, oh, it's such
yeah.
an important part of our lives, and it's such um, a sacred part of our lives is our sexuality. So.
Mhm.
Yeah. So thanks again so much. Always good to talk with you. I just want to say a couple things about what's going on with me. I've slowed down a little bit with the Facebook Lives, but I'm kind of considering what maybe once a month Facebook Lives. I also have my daughter Elizabeth Herman and I are doing a book group on Glennon Doyle's book Untamed, which I think really talks a lot about some of the things we talked about. I don't know. Have you read it yet?
I have. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
was hesitant to read it because I thought, well, she talks about authenticity and that's my brand and that's what I do. And I know all about authenticity. And my daughter kept like quoting it and people kept talking about reading it. And so finally I decided to download the Audible. And I was just so taken into the way Glennon Doyle can language the stuff that you and I are talking about in such an authentic and vulnerable and personal way. So I thought my daughter and I talked about doing a book group. So starting March 18th, Thursday night, 3 Thursdays, we're going to talk about Glennon Doyle's book Untamed. So it's free. You can go to my website. Hopefully, I'm also revising my website, and it's supposed to be live any day now. And there is a link on the news site to register. Also, if you're not on my mailing list, you can go to my website currently, the old one that's going to be gone soon, and get on it so that you can get the email about the book group and anything else that's going on. So yeah, that's what I'm doing, and also seeing people, mostly online right now. Christine's a little bit more in the office than I am, but maybe by the summer I'll be back. So
Well, I'd love to join you for that book club, Patty.
yay, that
I
would
need
be.
to get in on that. That'd be great.
It's from 5:30 to 7.
Okay.
She's on the East Coast, so it's 7:30 her time. She has to get her kiddos in bed, so that's how we pick the time.
Nice.
But yeah, I'd love
Okay.
it. And yeah, reach out. I think definitely we'll continue this conversation, Christine. I think you have so much wisdom to share from your experiences that I appreciate you.
I appreciate you, Patti. Yeah, thank you for your wisdom, and let's keep it going and keep having these conversations about expressing. And thank you for celebrating Women's History Month and helping us find our voices, and for all the incredible work you've been doing around grief and shame and finding our authentic voice, which is so important. Not just going through COVID and all the grief so many of us have gone through in COVID, but creating the new chapter, creating our new story as we move out of COVID. It's exciting times, and I appreciate all the resources, Patti, you've given me personally and continue to give your clients.
Thank you, Christine.
On
And
that.
back, yeah, we didn't even mention COVID. I mean, it's like it becomes such a norm, but it creates a whole other aspect of our lives too that kind of is, you know, definitely something to navigate. So thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you all
Thank you.
and yeah, we'll see you soon.